9 times out of 10 had ditches either side. Not always, there are examples where there weren't, but nearly always had ditches either side. So you're quite right, you would think they would have the common sense to know that it's going to be prone to flooding.
Especially as they've gone up the natural course of the land.
Yeah, so I can't explain that, but what I can tell you is that in any of the examples of cutting bottoms that have been excavated, there's never been any sign of a ditch.
Right.
So for some reason they never put ditches.
They probably just thought the water would get away naturally down there.
Probably.
Just kept rebuilding then.
I assume so.
And that might be spoiled.
Yeah. So what we've got here looks pretty much the same at first, but you can see we've actually got large stones placed in this edge. That's not the only one, there was another one on top of it which I had to take out when I excavated that. We've got good reason to think that there's more going under that way. They seem to have actually put a concentration of stone in here to make sure that that doesn't slip down onto the road. But it gets a bit more interesting. You can't see it clearly, unfortunately, because it's changed colour a bit since it got wet. But if you look at the surface of the clay here, on this clay surface there, I'll just rub it with my finger. Can you see how grey that's really grey? Whereas down here it's a yellowy grey. What we know is that this is actually a layer about 4 centimetres thick, a bit thinner in places, a bit thicker in others, of an additional layer of clay placed on top of the dumped clay bank and then puddled to make it waterproof, and on top of that they've sunk stones into it. Not all the way across, or at least they're not surviving all the way across. We've just got a few stones dotted in across the whole bank. But the interesting thing is, they're only on that slope. They don't go over the top. On the top level, there's no stones set into the top surface. Plenty of stone in the clay itself, but none on the surface. And there's nothing from that point down to here. That's the last one. So from there down to here, there's nothing. From that point up, we've got grey puddle clay with stones set into it. So what we think is happening, that is the original bank. That's not been touched in any way at all. That is the bank as it was built 1900 years ago. But the original curb would have been about here. So the road edge, and as it was built, would have been about where my hand is, roughly. And then when that first flood came along that swept everything away, it took the curbstones, the road surface, absolutely everything with it on this edge. And they've rebuilt at a later point a slightly narrower road and extended the bank down here. But as we said over there, as to what period that happened in, who knows? It could have been within the Roman period, more likely in the Middle Ages. We don't know when this road kept in use till. Presumably, and this would seem logical, it would be in use until the bridge was built in Hampswaite where it stands now. Because we know the bridging point, if we project this road forward, the bridging point across the Nid was about 300 metres downstream from where the current bridge is. It's always been assumed that the Roman bridge was on the same place as the current bridge. We can now say certainly it wasn't. It was 300 metres downstream.
So when was the current bridge built?
Good question, because it's been swept away many times. So when the first bridge was built there, I couldn't tell you. But I intend to try and find out. I'm sure somebody will have an idea who have done some research on it, but it's not my field. But we need to find out, because if we can determine when that was built, then we can assume that's the point when this went out of commission. You've seen in Trench 1 the material that's just been dumped from washed down. Some of the stones on this side are quite big, hefty stones and very angular, and they're very like the ones used in that in the structure of the revetment there. And what we think that material down there represents is the revetment. It's just been swept away. Where you're stood, the chap with the camera, we dug a trench here. This was our first trench. There's absolutely nothing in it. No road at all gone completely. We dug a series of test holes to see if there's any remains of the revetment. Absolutely nothing. So 3 metres further up we've got that. Here, nothing at all. Just completely destroyed. It's all down there. If there was a flash flood in an area like this sufficient to cause that sort of damage, what on earth did it do to the bridge in the Nid? So it's quite possible that when the last cataclysmic event actually happened and removed all that revetment, it also took the bridge with it, and that's the point when the bridge was moved in Antwerp. It's a guess, but
is there any documented floods going back nearly down?
Not that I'm aware of. No. I'm not saying there aren't, but I would doubt there would be at such an early period, because we're probably talking 13th, 14th century.
Yeah.
It would have to be before the village of Nidd as we know it now was basically laid out.
Right.
So I think before the 13th century would be most likely.
And this grey clay that's down here that you say that's been put down at a later stage, is that because it's grey, you know that? Is it because it's deeper clay, or?
No. The only reason we're saying that this is later, and you can never be positive about these things. We're just looking at the evidence and interpreting it. It's because the stones stop.
Right. And
the stones stop, coincidentally, at exactly the same place as the stone reinforcement of the revetment stops. So there's a change of something happening there, and because of the position, and it lines up very